Fight into terror as the desert erupts with the grim battle for survival. Here is a fear-frenzied moment of suspense.
Everybody knows the big ones. The Day the Earth Stood Still, War of the Worlds, the classics that show up on every list. This isn't that list. The 1950s were the golden age of science fiction. More than 200 films pouring out of the decade. And buried in that flood are dozens of strange, brilliant, genuinely unforgettable movies.
3 men went into outer space
That most people have completely forgotten. These are the deep cuts. The ones only real fans of the era still talk about. So if you think you know your 50s sci-fi, let's find out. Here are 20 films that separate the true believers from everyone else, starting at number 20. Number 20, The Quatermass Experiment, 1955. We start across the Atlantic with a little British film that changed horror forever and that most American fans have never seen. A rocket launches with 3 men aboard and crashes back to Earth with only 1, and something has come back inside him, something slowly turning him into a creature that isn't human anymore. If you're wondering about that strange spelling, Xperiment with an X, that was a marketing stunt. The film had earned Britain's adults-only X certificate, so the studio proudly worked it right into the title. That studio was Hammer, and this modest, creepy little movie was such an unexpected hit that it convinced them to pour everything into horror, kicking off the entire Hammer horror empire of Dracula and Frankenstein films that followed. Every one of those descends from this, a true origin point, hiding in plain sight. Number 19, Cat Women of the Moon, 1953.
Men into the den of bloodthirsty moon monsters, driving them to tempt men in the deadly cave of moon gold.
Now for something gloriously, unapologetically ridiculous. A crew of astronauts lands on the moon and discovers a hidden underground civilization of beautiful, telepathic women in black tights who plan to hypnotize the men, steal their rocket, and fly to Earth. It is exactly as gloriously silly as it sounds, shot in 3D on a shoestring budget, with giant spiders and cardboard caverns, and it's been mocked for decades as one of the great so-bad-it's-good pictures of the era. But here's why it earns a spot. This cheap little oddity was actually the very first film to do the astronauts discover an all-female alien world story, a premise that got copied so many times it became its own subgenre. It was even remade a few years later, giant spider and all. Every true B-movie fan knows this one. Almost nobody else does. Number 18, It Came from Beneath the Sea, 1955.
A tidal wave of terror engulfs the screen as a raging monster from the dawn of creation.
Long before Ray Harryhausen was a legend for Jason and the Argonauts and Clash of the Titans, he was a young effects artist making giant monster movies on almost no money. And this is one of the best of them. A gigantic octopus, mutated by hydrogen bomb tests, rises from the deep Pacific and lays siege to San Francisco, culminating in a famous sequence where it wraps its tentacles around the Golden Gate Bridge and tears it apart. Here's the detail every true fan loves. The budget was so tight that Harryhausen could only afford to animate 6 tentacles instead of 8. So he carefully posed the creature to keep you from counting, and jokingly nicknamed his monster the Sixtopus. It's a small, charming reminder that so much of this golden age was brilliant people doing extraordinary work with pocket change. The octopus is the real star, and it still holds up. Number 17, Kronos, 1957.
A metallic vampire stalking the Earth. Its purpose, to drain it of its energy, every last bit of vitality.
Most 50s sci-fi threats were rubber-suited monsters or giant insects. Kronos is a colossal alien machine, a towering block of metal that stomps across the landscape on piston legs, and its mission is chillingly modern. It's an energy accumulator sent by a dying alien world to drain our planet of every last watt of power and carry it home, growing larger and stronger with everything it absorbs. When the military drops an atomic bomb on it, that only feeds it. For a low-budget picture, that's a strikingly original and prophetic idea. A machine that consumes energy itself as its weapon. And here's a bit of connective trivia for the real fans. The story came from Irving Bloch. The Man Who Dreamed Up Forbidden Planet, and the director made The Fly just 1 year later. Both of those films are coming up later on this very list. Kronos is the forgotten cousin of far more famous movies, and it deserves rediscovery. Number 16, The Monolith Monsters, 1957.
Hit it now!
Here's one with a premise so unusual it barely fits the genre, and that's exactly why fans treasure it. In most 50s films, the threat is a creature or an alien. In this one, the threat isn't alive at all. Fragments of a strange meteorite land in the California desert, and when they get wet, they grow, sprouting into towering black crystal spires that climb hundreds of feet into the air, topple over, shatter, and grow again, advancing on a small town like a slow geological tide. Worse, they drain the silicon straight out of anything they touch, turning people to stone. There's no monster to shoot, no alien to reason with. The heroes have to solve it like a chemistry problem before an entire town is crushed and petrified. That completely inhuman threat, nature itself turned lethal, makes it one of the most quietly original science fiction films of the decade. The story came from Jack Arnold, the genre's finest director, whose fingerprints are on several other films in this countdown. Number 15, 4D Man, 1959. Comic book fans, this one will stop you cold, because it did something in 1959 that Marvel wouldn't make famous for decades. Letting him walk straight through solid matter, through walls, through steel, through anything. If that sounds familiar, it's essentially the exact power of Kitty Pryde from the X-Men, put on screen more than 20 years before she existed. But there's a terrible price. Every time he phases through something solid, he ages violently, decades in seconds, and the only way to restore his youth is to reach his hand into another living person and drain the life right out of them. It's a genuinely eerie, tragic idea, made by the same team behind The Blob, with a cool jazz score and a young Patty Duke in an early role. Robert Lansing plays the doomed scientist with real pathos as he slides from wonder into monstrous desperation. It's forgotten now, and it shouldn't be. Number 14, The Man from Planet X, 1951.
10:59.
Fire!
Ask most people to name the first alien visitor movie, and they'll say The Day the Earth Stood Still or The Thing from Another World, both from 1951. They'd be wrong, and this is the film that beat them. The Man from Planet X reached theaters in the spring of 1951, a month before The Thing, and a full half year before the day the Earth stood still, which makes this modest little picture the true starting gun of the entire alien invasion boom. A strange planet drifts near Earth, and a lone spacecraft lands on the foggy moors of a tiny Scottish island, carrying a haunting, sad-eyed visitor. Director Edgar Ulmer shot the whole thing in 6 days for around $40,000, using leftover sets and drowning everything in thick, glowing fog to hide how little money he had. The result is genuinely eerie and atmospheric, and it laid down the visual template that dozens of bigger, more famous films would follow. It came first, it shaped everything after it, and almost nobody remembers it. That's a true fans movie. Number 13, Quatermass 2, 1957.
From out of this world it came, a horrifying terror that threatened mankind, haunting and possessing every human being within range.
Earlier, we talked about the film that launched Hammer's empire. This is its sequel, and here's the surprising part. A lot of fans think it's even better than the original, and almost no one outside that circle has ever seen it. Professor Quatermass investigates a strange rash of meteorites falling on one small stretch of the English countryside, and it leads him somewhere genuinely chilling for 1957. A massive, secret government facility, its officials all marked with the same identical scar, part of a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of the state. The truth is that aliens have quietly infiltrated the British government from the top down, and the cover-up is total. That's a paranoid, politically charged idea years ahead of its time. Essentially, Invasion of the Body Snatchers aimed at the government itself, and it's woven with real anxieties about big power and hidden control. One more piece of trivia the true fans love. This is widely credited as the very first movie sequel to just slap a 2 in its title, a thing every franchise does now. It started here. Number 12, World Without End, 1956. 12 years before Planet of the Apes made the idea famous, this little movie did almost the exact same thing, and hardly anyone gives it credit. 4 astronauts returning from Mars hit a time warp and are hurled hundreds of years into the future, where they crash land on an Earth devastated by nuclear war. On the surface, savage one-eyed mutants roam the ruins. Below ground, the last civilized humans hide in a dying underground city, gone soft and passive. Astronauts thrown forward in time into a ruined future of mutants. That's Planet of the Apes, more than a decade early. And there are 2 great details for the true fans. First, it stars a young Rod Taylor, who just 4 years later would headline the classic adaptation of H.G. Wells's The Time Machine. So this was basically his warm-up for time travel. Second, it was the very first science fiction film shot in the widescreen splendor of CinemaScope, beating even Forbidden Planet to theaters. It was so close to Wells's Time Machine, in fact, that his estate threatened to sue. Number 11, It, The Terror from Beyond Space, 1958. If you've ever seen Alien, you have, in a sense, already seen this movie, and that's exactly why it belongs here. A spaceship is returning to Earth from Mars, carrying the lone survivor of a doomed expedition, a man everyone assumes murdered his own crew. He didn't. Something came aboard with him. A nearly indestructible alien creature is now loose on the ship, hiding in the air ducts and killing the crew one by one as they try desperately to survive in the sealed corridors with nowhere to run. Sound familiar? It should. This is widely recognized as a primary inspiration for Ridley Scott's Alien 2 decades later, right down to the monster in the air vents and the crew getting picked off in a claustrophobic ship. The creature here is a man in a stiff rubber suit rather than a nightmare designed by H.R. Giger, so it's easy to laugh at. But the bones of one of the greatest science fiction horror films ever made are right here, in this cheap little 1958 drive-in feature. Watch it, and you're watching the blueprint. Number 10, The Incredible Shrinking Man, 1957.
Now he lives in a world where he must fight for his life, a world where a friendly house cat is a predatory monster.
Now we reach the films where you might finally be nodding in recognition, and this is one of the greats. A man on a boating trip drifts through a strange radioactive mist, and soon afterward he begins to shrink, slowly, helplessly, inch by inch, until his house becomes a wilderness, his own basement an alien world, and an ordinary house cat and a common spider become monsters trying to kill him. It sounds like a gimmick, and in lesser hands, it would be. But the script came from Richard Matheson, adapting his own novel, and it treats the premise with startling seriousness and dread. The reason true fans revere it is the ending. The studio begged for a happy finish, where the man returns to normal size, and director Jack Arnold flatly refused, saying, "Over my dead body." He kept his own ending, in which the hero shrinks toward the infinitely small and makes peace with it, delivering a haunting, almost spiritual final monologue about his place in the universe. It's been called the most philosophical American science fiction film until 2001 arrived, a monster movie that becomes a meditation on existence. Number 9, It Came from Outer Space, 1953.
Yes, it came from outer space to fill the world with terror, to bring you unforgettable suspense.
Here's a film that quietly did something radical, and it took a legendary writer to pull it off. In 1953, nearly every alien in the movies came to conquer, enslave, or destroy us. This one didn't. When a spacecraft crashes near a small Arizona town, and its strange occupants begin taking on the forms of local people, everything is set up for standard invasion panic. But the aliens aren't invaders at all. Their ship simply broke down, and they only want to repair it and leave us in peace, disguising themselves because they know the sight of them would drive the town to violence. That gentler, more thoughtful idea came straight from Ray Bradbury, who handed the studio 2 versions of the story, one with hostile aliens and one with peaceful ones, and was delighted when they chose his peaceful version. The result is a quiet rebuke to all the fear and paranoia of the Cold War era, wrapped in an eerie desert mood. It was also Universal's very first film shot in 3D, and it's yet another from Jack Arnold, the quiet genius whose fingerprints are all over this list. Number 8, Them, 1954.
We may be witnesses to a biblical prophecy.
You know this one, or at least you know its children, because it invented an entire genre. Them opens on one of the most haunting images in all of 50s science fiction. A small girl wandering alone through the New Mexico desert, mute with shock, clutching a broken doll. Something out there destroyed her family. That something turns out to be ants, mutated by atomic testing into 15-foot monsters, and the film follows the hunt to stop them before they spread, climaxing in a battle with flamethrowers in the storm drains beneath Los Angeles. This was the very first of the atomic Big Bug movies, and its enormous success spawned a flood of giant creature films that defined the decade, none of which ever topped the original. It's smarter and grimmer than its reputation, playing more like a tense police procedural than a monster romp. Keep an eye out for two tiny early roles from soon-to-be famous faces, a young Leonard Nimoy and a young Vess Parker. It was Warner Brothers' biggest hit of the year, and it still holds up. Number 7, The Fly, 1958.
Stop it!
Everyone knows the 1980s version with the gruesome special effects. Almost nobody goes back to the original, and that's a real loss, because this one is a quiet tragedy. A brilliant scientist invents a teleportation machine and, convinced he's perfected it, tests it on himself. He doesn't notice that a common housefly has slipped into the chamber with him. The machine scrambles them together, and he emerges with the head and arm of an insect, slowly losing his mind and his humanity as the fly's instincts take over, while his wife desperately tries to catch the tiny fly, carrying his human head before it's too late. That leads to one of the most famous and genuinely chilling endings of the era, a faint, high-pitched cry of "Help me" from a creature trapped in a spider's web. Here's the trivia every real fan holds on to. Vincent Price is the star everyone remembers, but he does not play the fly, a mix-up people make constantly. The script was the very first by James Clavell, who'd go on to write Shogun, and the director had just made Kronos from earlier on our list the year before. He died a week after this film premiered, never knowing it became a classic. Number 6, This Island Earth, 1955.
Kidnap an airplane in flight.
We're into the top 6 now, the heavy hitters, and this one is here for pure spectacle. While most 50s sci-fi was shot in cheap black and white, Universal poured real money into This Island Earth and filmed it in gorgeous, saturated Technicolor, making it their most lavish science fiction film to that point. And it shows. A scientist is recruited by mysterious, high-foreheaded strangers to join a secret think tank, only to discover they're aliens from the dying planet Metaluna, locked in a losing war, who need Earth's brightest minds to save them. The trip to Metaluna, a world of fiery skies and crumbling cities, rendered in stunning matte paintings, still dazzles, and it gave the genre one of its most iconic monsters, the big-brained, claw-handed Metaluna mutant. Here's the detail true fans adore. The studio ran out of time finishing the mutant costume, so they never completed its insectoid legs, which is why this fearsome alien monster is inexplicably wearing a pair of trousers. And once again, some of the film's best sequences were reshot by the great Jack Arnold. Number 5, When Worlds Collide, 1951.
Awe-inspiring scenes ever put on film. The forces of nature unleashed in all their terrifying force.
Every time you watch a modern disaster movie where a comet or asteroid threatens to wipe out the Earth, you're watching the grandchildren of this film. When Worlds Collide is essentially Noah's Ark told with a rocket ship. Scientists discover that a rogue star is on a direct collision course with Earth, and it cannot be stopped. The planet has only months to live, so a small group races to build a spacecraft, an Ark, that can carry a tiny handful of survivors and animals to a new world before the end. And the film wrings real tension out of the cruelest question imaginable. with only a few dozen seats, who gets to live, and who gets left behind to die with everyone else. Produced by the legendary George Pal, its groundbreaking effects, from the gleaming rocket to the drowning of Manhattan under a tidal wave, won an Academy Award. It laid down the entire template for the disaster film, and it drove its moral dilemma harder than most modern blockbusters dare to. This is where that whole genre begins. Number 4, Invaders from Mars, 1953.
General of the army becomes a saboteur. The police turned into arsonists.
Everyone remembers Invasion of the Body Snatchers as the movie where your loved ones are replaced by cold alien copies. This film did it 3 years earlier, and it did it through the eyes of a child, which somehow makes it even more disturbing. A young boy wakes in the night and watches a flying saucer sink into the sandpit behind his house. The next morning, his father goes to investigate and comes back wrong, cold and cruel and hostile, with a strange mark on the back of his neck. One by one, the boy watches every adult he trusts, his parents, the police, the authorities, get taken over and turned against him, and no one will believe a word he says. It taps the deepest childhood fear there is, that the grown-ups who are supposed to protect you have become your enemies. It was directed by William Cameron Menzies, the visionary production designer behind Gone with the Wind, and he deliberately built the whole film to feel like a child's nightmare with tilted, oversized, dreamlike sets. It was also the first alien invasion film shot in color, and it burrowed so deep into a generation of young viewers that it helped shape the filmmakers who'd later create the Spielberg era. Number 3, The Thing from Another World, 1951.
Is it human or inhuman? Earthly or unearthly?
We're into the top 3, and this is the film that arguably started it all. When people talk about the 50s science fiction boom, this is the movie that lit the fuse, the most influential of them all. A military crew and a team of scientists at a remote Arctic base dig a crashed flying saucer out of the ice, along with the frozen body of its pilot. When the creature thaws and gets loose, they're trapped in the howling isolation of the Arctic with an intelligent, bloodthirsty thing hunting them through the corridors. What makes it sing is the filmmaking. It's credited to Christian Nyby, but it was really directed, quietly, by the legendary Howard Hawks, and it's stamped with his signature style, crackling, fast, overlapping dialogue, and a cast of characters who talk and argue like real people under pressure. The monster is played by a young, unrecognizable James Arness years before his Gunsmoke fame, and the film ends on one of the most famous closing lines in the genre, a reporter's urgent warning to keep watching the skies. Decades later, a young John Carpenter loved it so much, he made his own version. This is the wellspring. So much of what you've seen on this list flows from it. Number 2, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956.
They'll absorb your minds, your memories.
I don't want any part of it.
You're forgetting something, Miles.
What's that?
At number 2 is the film that took the decade's paranoia and distilled it into something so pure it still crawls under your skin. A doctor returns to his small California town to find people quietly insisting their loved ones aren't their loved ones anymore. They look the same. They sound the same. They remember everything, but something essential is gone. The truth is worse than anyone imagined. Giant alien seed pods are growing perfect copies of people while they sleep, and the moment you drift off, the real you is replaced by an emotionless duplicate. One by one, the whole town falls, until the doctor is the last real human left, running through the streets as everyone he knows tries to make him one of them. What makes it endure is that it's about more than aliens. People have read it as an allegory for McCarthyism, for the fear of communist conformity, for the terror of losing yourself in a crowd. And director Don Siegel deliberately kept it ambiguous, so it means whatever your particular nightmare is. Here's what true fans know. Siegel's original ending was pure despair, the hero staggering into traffic, screaming, "You're next," straight at the audience. The studio panicked and forced him to add a hopeful framing scene. But that raw terror still bleeds through, which is exactly why it's never stopped being remade. Number 1, Forbidden Planet, 1956.
With lots and lots of star sapphires.
Star sapphires take a week to crystallize properly.
If you take only one film away from this whole list, make it this one. because Forbidden Planet is the moment science fiction cinema grew up. Everything before, it still had one foot in cheap monsters and Saturday matinees. This film reached higher. In the 23rd century, a starship crew travels to the distant world of Altair 4 to find out what silenced a colony 20 years earlier. They find only 2 survivors, a reclusive scientist named Morbius and his daughter, who has never seen another man, living in a sleek home tended by a machine called Robbie the Robot. But something invisible and monstrous still prowls that planet, an unseen force that tore the original colonists apart, and the mystery of what it is builds to one of the most haunting reveals in all of science fiction. I won't spoil it. I'll just say the answer is far stranger and far more tragic than a monster from outer space, and it's the idea that lifted this whole genre to a new level. Look at everything this film did first. It was the first major movie set entirely on another world, with no scenes on Earth at all. MGM poured over $2 million into it and borrowed animators from Disney for the effects. Its story was quietly lifted from Shakespeare's The Tempest, and its soundtrack was the first ever made entirely from electronic tones. So strange the Musicians Union wouldn't let it be called music, and its fingerprints are everywhere. The crew exploring strange new worlds, the sleek starship.
Their tension, their readiness for inconceivable adventures.
Sir, we're being radar scanned.
The whole tone of intelligent space adventure, all of it flowed straight into Star Trek a decade later. Gene Roddenberry cited it as an inspiration. A young Leslie Nielsen, long before his comedy days, plays the commander with a completely straight face. Nearly every film on this list was pointing toward this one. It took a whole decade of science fiction and lifted it somewhere the genre had never been. True film fans have never forgotten it.